Welcome to Sparking Success with Opalewski. Aaron brings you conversations that spark innovation, cultivate leadership skills, and pave the way for your business success. In each episode, we delve into the dynamic world of business and leadership, exploring strategies, insights, and success stories that fuel your professional journey.
Hey everyone, welcome to Sparking Success. I'm Aaron Opalewski, and today we have one of my favorite people to listen to in the podcasting world, specifically in the recruiting space, Mark Whitby. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Aaron. It's my honor and pleasure to be here.
It's awesome to have you here. We were talking a little bit before, and I've just been looking forward to this conversation all week. We've had some other great ones, but I told you before we got going, I look forward to listening to your show from a recruitment aspect of, I just love some of the things that you get into, the guests that you have on, and how your acumen kind of shines within your own podcast. And then from a podcast host standpoint, which is something that I am very green in, and learning, just how you ask questions and how you challenge people, but doing it in a way that is not abrasive. But you're not afraid to ask a tough question. You're not afraid to challenge someone. You're not afraid to maybe disagree, on a topic, but you do it in a way, your tone, your demeanor, it's an art. And not only it's like, man, can I learn from that as a host, right? But it's just great leadership lessons, I think, for how to approach conflict or disagreements or different approaches, or kind of challenge someone without being abrasive. So I don't think I've shared that with you completely, but those are some of the things that I enjoy about listening to Mark.
Wow. Thank you so much, Aaron. That's very kind feedback. And I'm really enjoying our collaboration. I think this is the third time that we've been able to work together, and we have more things planned, which I'm sure we'll get into. What I admire and respect about you is not only your success in business, which is extraordinary, but also that you're seeking to give back, to add value, and to share what you know with other people, and in ways that don't, obviously or immediately benefit you directly. So I love it and looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, I am too. So let's get into it. I like to start, I just like to learn more about your recruiting story and how you got into recruiting, and we'll start there and get into some other stuff.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So my first business actually, Aaron, was when I was 19, and it was during the summer. It was one of those painting franchises, and I thought it was going to make, my other friends were working in doing, waiters, waitresses, and that kind of summer job. I thought, I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm going to work for myself. And it was a disaster. I lost my shirt. So I was working, 12, 15-hour days, and, every day it wasn't raining, right? And instead of getting paid, I paid for the privilege of working all those hours. It was such an education. I also made the mistake of hiring all my friends, and either ended up firing them or they end up quitting. So many business lessons that I learned from that experience, but financially it was horrendous. So ended up not quite sure what I wanted to do after university, apart from I needed to pay off this big debt that I had accumulated. The one thing that I liked best and that I was best at from that whole experience was the sales part. So, I was hopeless at managing. It was my first management job. I was hopeless at managing the finances, all the other, the production, the fulfillment, all that stuff. But I was actually good at the selling part. And so that was and I'd never done that before. So that was a good discovery. So I knew I was going to do something regarding selling, and that I needed to make money and pay off this debt. So met this fantastic girl from Scotland, decided to seek my fame and fortune on the other side of the pond. I'm from Halifax, Nova Scotia, moved over to Edinburgh, Scotland, which is where she was from, and started applying for jobs, sales jobs, and saw this ad for the job of a recruitment consultant. I never heard of this job before, and decided that I'd apply because, get this, the advertised on-track earnings was something like $35,000, which is, I don't know, about £35,000 is about $50,000. That sounded like a phenomenal amount of money to me at the time. I was like, wow, if I could make $50,000, that would be amazing. So applied for it, got it, and that's how I got my start in recruiting.
Okay, and then from there, how's your career progressed in the industry?
Yeah, it wasn't brilliant to begin with, to be honest. Like in those days, there wasn't the same attention paid to onboarding people, learning and development. It was very much sink or swim. So you're in the sales bullpen and you're just dialing for dollars and trying to figure it out, listening to what other people were doing. And actually, I sucked at it in the beginning, to be honest. But I had so much hunger to succeed. I think that's what got me through. It wasn't skill; it was just will in those early days. And identified some people who were doing pretty well. Tried to emulate them, and ended up doing okay. Was headhunted by another firm, which was bigger and actually had proper training, and joined them. But I still was only average, Aaron, and I was not satisfied with that. I was ambitious to do really well, to, make more money, and felt frustrated that the effort that I was putting forth wasn't materializing in the results that I was experiencing. So I ended up hiring a coach, a guy who I had met back home. His name was Ravi Tangri, and a brilliant guy. And he helped me double my billings in 90 days. And that's what really turned around my whole career in recruiting. And so then what happened is I got promoted. I started actually making good money and feeling more confident, more successful, having more fun. And it's kind of a virtuous cycle, right? Like success breeds success. And so everything started going better for me at that point. But that's what sort of sowed the seed for me to think that maybe coaching and helping other people to experience that same transformation might ultimately be my true career path.
Awesome. And is that where recruitmentcoach.com was born, or?
Well, not quite. It was another year or two before I actually launched the coaching business, but it was, looking back, it's more in retrospect, I realized that was a pivot point where I've always been into personal development, like going to Tony Robbins events or reading books about sales and that kind of stuff. So I was always interested in training and learning and coaching for myself, but I never imagined that I could be the coach until that point. And I was like, that was such a life-changing experience. I want to do that for other people.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. I love that. I feel very similar. So I didn't know that you did manual labor as well for a period of time.
Well, yeah.
Did you find it? So I did party rental events and had my own company for all of 3 months doing that. I might have shared that story when I was on your episode. I don't remember, but we made a little bit of money, and then we didn't. It got shut down real quick because we were using another company's equipment, but they were kind of holding our lease for our truck, and my partner got a great idea, but not an ethical one per the agreement that was signed on the insurance, which they signed, we didn't, but we were using vegetable oil for fuel to save costs, and it worked. And my mind was blown that it worked. Now our truck smelled like French fries, but and that's what ultimately was the clue, that because we were still using their shop. We had a really sweet deal. We did 60-40 split with them, used all their equipment, and just took over some of the residential business and worked our butts off for 16 to 20 hours a day and slept at the shop during the busy season. and we were making a little money, and we were doing probably a little bit better on our margins because we weren't paying any gas expense. But that all kind of came crumbling down when they're like, hey, like what you guys are doing is in violation of this agreement we signed. Like, that's not okay, guys. And we're like, okay, sorry. And they're like, yeah, we think we're done with this. You guys can either buy all the equipment or like this is just going to be done. We're like, well, I think we're out of the party rental business at that point. So some business lessons there about like doing the right thing and like not cutting corners. But for me, when I got into recruiting, a couple of years later, I had that as a point of reference. Like, man, if I'm willing to bust my butt, manual labor, work hard, and for whatever it was, not as much money. Like, yeah, I'll put in a 12-hour, 14-hour day here where I get to talk to people on the phone and put them to work, and like, yeah, I'll do that. Did you have that same kind of like thought process at all? Like, man, it's hard. It's mentally taxing, but man, it beats being in the back of a box truck with sweat dripping down me out.
Yeah, for sure. Like I don't know. There's definitely much harder jobs, right? And people, ways that people make a living. Being a recruiter or a salesperson or a business owner and getting paid to help other people. I mean, that's definitely a privilege, right? But having said that, it's tough. Like, it's not easy. It's emotionally and mentally tough rather than physically tough.
There you go.
So I don't want to I don't want to dismiss that. It does still take. It's a different kind of tough, right?
I'm glad
to be
you said
successful at anything, I think, is hard, right? But it's choose what type of, challenge, I guess, you're up for.
That was my initial thought process coming into recruiting, like mentally, like I want to make it clear. The hardest thing if you want to be a lead in recruiting, I believe it's the hardest thing you will ever do in your life. There's always context to that. There's other things that come up in life, but man, is it mentally like your mindset and consistent, like it is hard. So I agree.
Yeah, I interviewed a guy on my podcast and he made the point, like, we're not taking dishes for a living, right? There's things that are way, harder, and the fact that we can earn a good living doing this and it can be really fun, right? So it's not like I don't mean to suggest that this is, this is super, super hard, but mentally and emotionally, it's not for everyone. Let's put it that way.
It is not. So it's a mentally taxing career. Better, in my opinion, the better you get, and the better your pipeline gets and your client base by doing the right things, you kind of build up this armor, almost, where stuff kind of flings off you. But the more successful, the more things that go wrong too. You just got to learn to mentally grow that way, I think.
Yes, growth is one of my top values, actually, and it's one of our business values as well. And growth doesn't come without resistance, right? And so, in order to grow and to learn, it means that you've done tough things, you've encountered resistance, you've had to push through, and so yeah, it is definitely a growth opportunity. So if you like learning and you're open to constantly improving, then I think it's a great career.
So what gave you the idea, or how did the Resilient Recruiter podcast get started?
Yeah, so how I've learned is by seeking out other people who have more experience than me or have knowledge on things that I don't know, and trying to learn from them, right? And so I've always done that. And going back to, I told you, like, when I first started recruiting, I would find people who were good at certain things. Like, someone was good at running a client meeting. Well, I want to sit in and learn how they do that. Can I ride shotgun? Can I come along to that meeting and see how you manage the conversation, how you structure it, how you close, how you deal with objections? Likewise, one guy, who was brilliant he was charging much higher fees than I was. And I was like, what is he saying, or how is he positioning himself that clients will pay him way more than they're paying me? And I was like, can I take you to lunch and just pick your brain? So I've always done this, is look for mentors, look for role models, look for people who are successful and try and model what they're doing. So the podcast really was just more of the same thing, but I figured if I record these conversations, then, they could benefit more people. That's kind of how it evolved. So, I actually wish I'd started the podcast sooner, Aaron, because I had the idea probably 3 or 4 years before I actually launched it. So I launched it in 2019, but it was probably more like 2015 that I thought I should start a podcast, but I procrastinated. It seemed overwhelming. It seemed like there were so many moving parts, and I just kept putting it off. So that's probably my biggest regret, is I waited too long, but it is what it is.
Hey, the next best time is now. Right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Well, man, I think here's something interesting, or at least it's interesting to me. I wonder what you think about it, but I found a similar experience when I got into recruiting. One of the things that attracted me to recruiting is that I knew I wanted to be in business. And, what I really wanted to be is what I thought, like what I pictured success being at the time. And a lot of that was tied to monetary success and being able to provide for a family, even though I didn't have one yet. And not having to worry about how much the bill was going to be at a lunch or a dinner, like stuff like that. Like, because I grew up in a whole different, situation. So when I met some people, specifically the person that recruited me into recruiting, and they brought me into that office and they showed me, this person makes 6 figures, this person makes multi-6 figures, this person's doing this. When I just got to know them and saw, some of the things that they were able to do within their lifestyle, I was attracted to that. And I'm like, okay, I think I found something here. Even though I don't know everything about it, I'm very interested in this because that matched with their like, hey, we have a blueprint that if you do this blueprint, you're going to be successful. You have to do it. It's going to be hard, but if you do it, you'll be successful over time. And I'm like, man, this is great. Like, this is just like a sport for me. Give me the blueprint. I'm going to figure out how to not just do that, but go above and beyond it. And for me early on, because you got to learn. Well, how do you speed up your learning curve? I believe it's with more reps, or that's my favorite way to do it. There's other ways, but that's my favorite way. And that works, so it's just like learning from people that way. But here's the other side of it. I was in an office with 80 people, and one of the things that stuck out to me in one of my first conversations with the guy that brought me in was some of the things that he said not to do. Not to take the hour-and-a-half lunch, not to, when you get into sales, always be on a meeting Friday at 3 p.m., and so on and so on and so on. Being available for the daily stand-up meetings, don't always have a meeting right at that time. Just these little things. And then I would watch people too. You'd watch the top performers, and I would watch people that were really good in certain areas, and I absolutely learned from them. But I'd also watch the things that kept them from performing at a mid-level and not be able to break through at the high level and say, okay, this is something they do really well. This is something that they're struggling with. And I got to make sure that I don't do this because I'm not special. Like if I struggle with these things too, I will also perform at an average level, not an above average level. So I think I'm hearing that in what you're saying, and I just like completely agree that like there's so much to learn. It took me longer than I think you to realize, like, once I got out of that environment where there was 80 other people, I learned for a little bit, and then you kind of get to a point where you know what you know. And then I went a period where I didn't really read books. I didn't listen to podcasts. I didn't do this stuff. And I didn't have anyone to learn from anymore. And I think it really stalled my growth. So I love what you're doing. And I found something similar. I think there was this gap of time where I wish I would have progressed that way sooner, but everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it sounds like a lot, but what do you think your biggest takeaway from doing, like, if you had to tell me one thing, specifically to the industry, what have you learned from the podcast time that you didn't know prior to doing it?
Do you mean about podcasting or about?
No, I mean about recruiting
industry.
Yeah. Sorry. Thank you for asking me that. I didn't clarify well. What's your biggest takeaway from doing the podcast within the recruiting space?
Okay. Do you know what's really interesting is so I'm excited for you that you're doing this. And by the way, you're not that green. I think you're 30 or 40 episodes in. So you've done a lot of reps already. I love really drilling down deep and understanding how people do what they do, why they do it, the mindset, the psychology behind it, their belief system, their strategies, their processes, their habits. I just find that endlessly fascinating. But my biggest takeaway, Aaron, is that, well, there's a couple of things. Number one, there's not one right way to do this, because I've seen, originally when I started the podcast, I thought, I know I'm going to find what are the 5 habits that everyone has in common, or what are the techniques that the top performers all have in common. And I haven't found that. It's been really interesting that, equally successful people, but they have completely different approaches. For example, one person will be all about cold calling, and they think that is the foundation of their success, has been built on cold calling and using the telephone. And then I'll interview someone also who's very successful, who never cold calls, who uses digital marketing, right? And so who's right? Well, they both have a system or a formula, like you said, that works for them. And the corollary to that, the other thing that I've noticed is that the people who you hear on my podcast or your podcast who are very successful, they still haven't got everything figured out, right? So you shouldn't assume that what they say is gospel and you should imitate what they're doing. For sure, there's lessons, there's things you can learn from them, there's techniques, there's golden nuggets, but there's holes in their game, there's gaps, there's things that they don't know, right? And so that's been really interesting to me as well, is seeing, wow, this person's really successful, but they're not even doing this, or they're not doing that. And I can see things that they're missing in their game. But so nobody's perfect, and don't assume that you're less than, or you're not as good as someone else just because they might be billing more than you. We're all on this journey, and we all have things we need to learn and improve at.
That's well said. I want to think about how I want to say this. So compared to when you're doing one-on-one coaching, how do you feel like during the time that you've been podcasting, that because that you're getting this barrage of different styles and strengths and unique abilities, do you feel like it's helped you to become a better coach in a one-on-one setting or a group setting, because you're just more in the know of different ideas?
Absolutely. I mean, I feel very, very lucky and privileged that, having now, been in the recruiting industry for 25 years, and no, actually it's longer than that. I've lost track of how many years, but I've been a coach for 23 years, so it must be longer than that. I've worked with literally thousands of recruiters now, hundreds of firm owners, and some of the best people, some of the top billers in the world, some of the fast people like Aaron Opalewski, right? And so having access to people like you definitely has made me smarter, for sure. It's so, I attribute my success more to that than anything else, is what I've been able to learn from all of the brilliant people that I have coached and or been coached by. And so I'm standing on the shoulders of giants for sure. And so that for sure, that is something which I think if people work with me, it's not because I'm so smart and brilliant. It's because I've been around enough successful people that some of those things have gone in. I've been able to add those strategies to my toolkit as well.
Okay. All right. So if you give me more on this, that's fine. But I like to visualize this as like legs on a chair, like the pillars of recruiting. So I'll ask you, I'm not the biggest fan of lists myself, even though I know that's good for content purposes and stuff like that. The thing is, there's always more context to it, right? So, but if you were to give me the top 4 pillars of building a recruiting agency, in your opinion, what are they? And if you give me less or more than 4, that's fine. But
there's 6 actually. So,
okay.
Yeah. So this is our framework that our coaching program is built on, is the 6 pillars of a 7, plus figure recruitment agency. Awesome. And they are clients, candidates, team, operations, marketing, and strategy. I'm happy to go into more detail about any of those things. But essentially, what we find is that usually when people start a recruitment business, it's because they're good at recruiting, right? They're maybe successful billers. But what they quickly discover is that running a business is not the same as being successful in the thing, right? So, if you read The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, then he gives a story about a lady who loves baking. So she decides she's going to open a patisserie, right? Or a bakery. I can't remember which it was. But in any case, and then realizes, wow, being a good baker is not a guarantee you're going to be successful at running a bakery, right? That's a whole different thing. That's a different skill set. There's all kinds of, things you need to know to run a profitable business that you didn't need to know to be a successful recruiter. So to run a successful agency, you really need to optimize in each of those dimensions. So, client acquisition, we need to have a predictable pipeline and constant flow of, your ideal customers, and then be able to convert them and partner with them in long-term, profitable relationships. Candidates, we need to really have a delivery machine, right? Where you're able to fill more jobs faster, but without it necessarily involving more of your effort. So we need to put something in place that is scalable. So otherwise, you're always on this roller coaster of get a job, fill a job, get a job, fill a job, which is where a lot of recruiters get stuck, is that roller coaster, because they don't have... So go ahead.
If we can go, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I'm interested to go further into that one there. What is your recommended method, or what are you willing to share in regards to setting that up, for success at a more scalable level, let's call it?
Are you talking about the candidate side of things?
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds like the fulfillment side.
Yeah, the fulfillment side, exactly. So I think a big mistake that a lot of firm owners make is working as a sourcer in their own recruitment business. That doesn't make sense, right? Now, understand you're good at that, but
not if you want to get to 3 million. Not if you want to get to 3 million.
There's no way. So that's the thing. Just because you're good at something doesn't mean it's the highest and best use of your time, right? So it's figuring out, what are you best at? Where can you really have the biggest impact? And where can you focus your efforts for the maximum return, right? And sourcing and maybe even recruiting are probably not those things. So, this kind of goes hand in hand with team. We need to build a support system around you so that you can focus on those 20% activities that generate 80% of your results without you getting pulled into like building lists on LinkedIn, finding people's phone numbers and email addresses, validating email addresses. These kinds of tasks are, now when you first start, you just got to do what you got to do, right? You have to do everything. But as soon as possible, you need to put systems, processes, and people in place to free up your time so that you can level up the quality of things that you're focused on.
Correct. Okay. Yeah, I agree. I'm sitting here thinking, I may have to have you talk to one or two of our people internally just to hear it from a different voice.
From a different voice. Sure, happy to do that and pay it back. I mean, the other factor, of course, is technology. I'm amazed. There's so much great technology. There's almost an overwhelming number of tools that are out there available now. So it blows my mind and by the way, I'm not making anyone wrong. Everyone, we all have blind spots, including me. One that it's easier to see other people's blind spots easier to see other people's challenges than to see our own, right, Aaron?
Yep.
The expression I've heard is that when you're inside the bottle, you can't read the label. And so one of the things I can observe when people ask me for help is that, they're manually doing things in their business which could be automated. So they're cutting and pasting, recruiting messages and sending in mails that they might be tweaking a little bit, but 90% of it is a cut and paste. Well, if that's the case, why are you, who is the owner or the leader or the biller in this business, why are you cutting and pasting messages and doing that repetitive task, 20 or 30 times or 100 times? That doesn't make any sense. We need to leverage other people's time and automation technology wherever, in your recruiting process, wherever you can identify those gaps. And by the way, the question you asked me earlier to elaborate on the fulfillment side, I didn't do a good job of answering. What I would encourage people to do, the very first thing is actually just write out, what is your whole recruiting process? Just at a high outline level, what are all the steps? Really think it through, like step by step by step. What's your recruiting process? And then you've got a way to figure out, well, how can I streamline this? How can I make it more efficient? Am I missing some steps? What can I do to make it even more effective? And then which of these steps could be automated and, which of these steps could be delegated? I think that might be a good starting place.
Like that. Okay. So you went through, you said clients, candidates, team.
Yeah.
So I think we covered those three. You said you had three others.
Yeah. So the operations, marketing, strategy.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's a great list. I even look at hey, the reasons we have a portfolio of 7 companies, and it's not the only thing, but one of the main proponents that we bring in value to an organization or individual that may be a really good elite recruiter or have a team that they're building that's doing some great things. Generally, it's somewhere between $1 million and not yet at that 3 million mark so far. Now, in the future, we want to go after someone a little farther down the line because that's just our strategy. But our strategy has been find the people that are good at this level. They're able to do this. They love this, but they've had a hard time maybe building out that ops team, or they don't want to do that, and just kind of roll them into what they're doing. So we got that covered for you. So I think you just nail it on the head with that, because that, in my opinion, that's an area where when you're building out that team, if you're a really good recruiter, I know the hardest part of it for me was I'd never led an ops team, let alone I was learning how to lead in general, but I didn't know anything about operations really. I knew a little bit, but that's the area that I've had to read, listen to podcasts, seek out mentorship, learn through some mistakes, but and really just kind of put that all together. But that took a decade.
I agree 100%. And I think many, not all, but many recruiters, the operations side is not their natural forte. Do you know the EOS method?
Yep. Yes.
So I'm definitely a visionary, and I suspect you are as well. I definitely hit a plateau that I couldn't get past until I met my now business partner, Leanne Jones-Hunt. She's the integrator in our partnership. And so it's not enough to be good at sales, to be good at marketing, to be good at recruiting. To really scale something, you need to have the operations in place. So the fact that you guys can deliver that to your portfolio companies, that's a huge value add. For me, that was and still is my weakness. And luckily, Leanne is brilliant at that. So she came on board as my COO. And that's when things really took off, is once she was in place. I had a lot of the right pieces in place, but it just wasn't clicking together until we had that operational know-how. And that's when things took off.
It's awesome. I think that's one of the things I love about business, and I've heard you say it kind of a few times in a different parts of the conversation. I think that's one, you're just telling the truth, but it just, what happens in business is, like, if you're trying to do something great, like we can't all be great at everything, right? We all have unique gifts and talents, and it's like, that's like, I'm money motivated, I'm competitive, I want to grow the company, like all these things are true. You're a hero, I want to make an impact, and I absolutely do. It's like, well, what's a way that we can make an impact? Well, when we put someone in a position to really unlock or use their unique gifts, I believe that's truly making an impact. You're setting that person up to hopefully achieve success monetarily in their career, but also it's not the only thing that's going to lead them to fulfillment. But I think you're setting up a situation where you're most likely going to allow that person to flourish. And it's not that it's going to be easy, but they have a great opportunity to do something that they were uniquely designed to do. And that can be very fulfilling.
Well said. I agree. Absolutely. And I have lots of those weaknesses. And so it really is key to surround yourself with people who have complementary skills, but share the same values and are committed to the same vision, but bring something different to the table. I think that's the key to winning, really.
Okay. So we have the live event coming up.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Okay, cool. So, by the way, thank you so much for agreeing to be a speaker at the Recruitment Coach Live Summit. I'm really excited about this. So it's October 9th and 10th. Folks can learn more at recruitmentcoach.com/summit. It's basically 2 days of surrounding yourselves with like-minded people, success-oriented people who are already successful and want to be even more successful. So we've got a lot of multi-six-figure, seven-figure billers in the room, as well as owners of multi-million-dollar recruiting firms. And I think the common denominator, though, is mindset. We look for people. We want to work with people who are coachable. Number one, what that means is they're open to being challenged. They're receptive to feedback, to taking on board new ideas, to trying different things, to pushing past their comfort zone. Not everyone is wired that way, Aaron. And in fact, I spoke to a really nice gentleman a couple of weeks ago and actually declined for him to join our coaching program because, good guy, he was billing like $300,000 or $400,000. He wanted to get to $1 million. And as I was talking to him and I was, evaluating what he was currently doing and making suggestions of things that he could do, whether or not he worked with us. Like, I always try and bring value to every conversation, regardless of whether we end up doing business. And every idea I suggested to him, he was like, "Oh no, I don't like, I wouldn't do that, or I couldn't do that, or no, I don't like this." He was basically rejecting every single strategy that I suggested. And I was like, "Sir, I don't think we can work together because Now, why don't you just keep doing what you're doing? It's working fine for you, right? You've got a nice lifestyle. You're doing well for yourself. But what I will tell you is that the same strategies, thinking, and techniques that got you to where you are not the same ones that are going to get you to $1 million, right? And so, so that's not who you'll find at the Live Summit. Who you find at the Live Summit are the people who are coachable, and no matter how successful they already are, they're still open to learning. But the other side of that, and this is where I really admire you, Aaron, is the people who are coming to this event are equally willing to share what they know and what has worked for them with other people. And so it's a kind of abundance mindset, because often in business, and I know this is true in recruiting as well, when I worked in a recruitment agency, we were taught like the competition or the enemy, right? So you don't want to share your secrets or say anything. You don't even want to talk to them, right? It's that kind of, which is stupid, right? Because, who do you have the most in common with? It's other people in the same industry. And there's so much opportunity out there that we're better off if we share knowledge and try and help each other. So that's the mindset of the folks who are coming along. It's, people who are successful already, but who still want to learn and are also willing to share what they know and help other people.
Well, thanks for sharing that. First off, I'm honored to be a part of it, and they asked me to be a part of it, and I'm really excited to meet each other in person. That's going to be cool.
Yeah, definitely.
We haven't yet.
Yeah.
So, but, we have a core value, be humble, crave improvement. And it's all over this episode. It probably won't be the title, but it could be.
Yeah.
And, those are my kind of people. So I was already excited, but just to hear a little bit more about that and know that that's like the overall, mindset of the crew that's going to be there, like that's awesome. Because for me, we talked about fulfillment, right? And since we switched from just having one company to now we have this portfolio, and I have the ability to do, I've become more open, with sharing. And what do you know? That's just, we haven't even, these things have kind of, I don't want to say they just kind of fallen in our lap, because a lot of diligence and, for the 7 that we have, or the 6 that we've added, we've looked at 150 plus that just weren't a match, and that's okay. At least right now. But we didn't seek out any of these things. They came together over a period of time. But my favorite thing is to work with people that are pushing to be their best, and understand that that's a day by day thing, and that we can always improve. We can always learn from other people. And we're never done. And the second we think that we've got it all figured out, well, we're going to be in for some kind of rude awakening that hopefully gets us back on the right track. But when you stick in this mindset, you don't necessarily have to go through that pain if you're humble, not in a way that means you have no confidence, right? But that you just understand that there's always more to learn. You can always learn from others. So I love that. It's really hard for me to line up with that. That I was laughing because the person you mentioned, I just have a hard time. Man, I will pour into someone. I'm so passionate about what we do. And you said it earlier, it's the same for me. It's changed my life. It's completely changed my life, this industry. And I've just learned so much. I'm so grateful for it. And I love sharing it with other people. I ultimately would love if those people come, join what we're doing and the mission we're on and all this stuff. But I just love it in general. It just opens the door for so many things. It's hard for me, and I've got better at it, but it's hard when, you're pouring all that energy and it's not reciprocated, or when someone that's like, oh, I can't figure this out. And then you're making some suggestions that, are not, probably from experience, and the person chooses not to do that. Those are not my favorite situations. So kudos to you for not just taking the client on kind of protecting the brand, the culture. I think that's great.
Absolutely. Well, I want to surround myself with people who give me energy, not drain my energy, right? That's the first thing. And secondly, I want to work with clients who inspire me and who I can learn from. And number 3, I think we've curated and built a really special community, and I don't want to compromise that. And for the sake of, because that, revenue from that customer is going to cost, and it's going to, it could easily turn into a loss if you bring someone in who's not right, and you end up disrupting other people and losing them as a result. So that would be very short-term thinking.
Okay. So I had one more thing down. We can talk about anything else that you feel passionate about talking about. But
okay,
the one other thing I had down, just because I enjoy hearing from you on this so much, and we've had some discussions. I could probably talk to you about this for 8 hours straight. I'll try not. I'll be respectful of your afternoon. And but so revenue versus gross profit, and then the importance of reoccurring revenues. I know those are kind of like two things at once, but for me, I think these things are so important in our industry. Yeah. And I just wanted to first hear your thoughts on why those are important and see where it leads us. Because again, I think I could talk to you about these topics all day.
Yeah, I love that you talk about these things, because it's really interesting. Recruitment is recruitment, and people are people, right? And we all ultimately are motivated by the same things. We all want, security for our family, and, status, and, fulfillment. But there are some nuances in terms of the recruiting industry between the UK and the US. There's some differences. And so one of those is, over here, it's a lot more common to have, like staffing and recruiting aren't really considered two different things. So there's a lot more kind of blended businesses which do, permanent executive recruitment as well as contract. And the terminology that I grew up with was gross profit is the important number. That's what you focus on, right? Regardless. So that's because if you have a business where you have permanent billers and you have contract billers, you need to measure them the same way. So you need to be looking at the same number. So what is that number? Is gross profit, right? Mm. So on the permanent side, that's whatever invoices you've sent out to the client. And on the contract or temp side, that's the difference between what you've invoiced the client and what you've paid your temp, right? So that way you can compare how people are performing in a kind of like-for-like way. And when I started working with American recruiting companies, they kept talking, or staffing companies, they kept talking about revenue. I'm like, okay, but how much are you actually keeping from that, right? And so they'd give me these huge numbers, and I'd be like, wow, that's impressive. But then I'm like, wait a second, how much do you have left after you pay your contractors? And like, oh, I'm not really sure.
Yeah,
okay.
It's not.
That's the number you.
I don't know.
Right. That's the number you need to know. Gross profit. There's synonyms. Now, this is confusing because an accountant has a specific definition of gross profit, which is a little different to what we talk about in recruiting with gross profit, right? So
I'm laughing real quick because I was just on the phone with our CPA, and we were arguing on this topic on our financial reporting for 2023.
Right.
It was nothing substantial. It was just I didn't like his definition of some, like how he pulled some stuff out of that number. I'm like, no. Right.
We're
literally arguing about
exactly. So the way we use the word gross profit in recruiting is not the strict accounting definition of gross profit, right?
Agreed.
But it's that is the number. And so all of our clients I've drummed this into them that I don't even care what your revenue is. It's not, it's sure, revenue is important, top line revenue is important, but what's more important is gross profit. That's the real number that we need to be measuring. And then you can measure what's your gross profit per employee, for example, which if you're growing a firm, that's a really important number to track. We've talked about that one before. But I feel like I'm going off on a tangent. So let's.
No, I think, the higher that revenue number could be, the more important the understanding of the gross profit is, right? Like, yeah. Hey, we're we're having to spit out these dollars from a capital perspective. What are we actually not keeping bottom line, but what do we actually have to kind of work with after we send out the money that it costs to have these people working for us? Like, what's left? Because that's what's going to pay our staff, buy our tools, hopefully spit out a net income, a profit, a positive EBITDA. It's important. And so, you float out this big number and like, okay, I want to know, am I at 30? Am I at 40% gross profit? Am I at 8? Because if I'm at 8, I don't have enough, in my opinion, enough money to run the organization properly.
Right.
Let alone make a profit. So
we're on the same page here. So definitely, everyone, if you don't know what your gross profit is right now, that's your homework to go and find out. And
there you go.
Ideally, what's your gross profit per employee? That's a really critical metric to track.
When you say employee, I know how you're talking about your internal team.
Yes, exactly. No.
You could do the measure on your gross profit per person placed too. And I think it's good to do both.
That's true. Yeah.
But you're talking about the inverse of, like, you're talking about the internal team.
Exactly. So what I would call that metric average placement value.
Yep.
Right. It would be gross profit per person that you place versus for your internal employees. If you take your gross profit, divide by how many internal employees we have, that's how you get the other number.
There you go. Yeah. And that one that you're referencing, that's on our, we call it a report card, but we have 14 measurement line items. That's on it. I don't necessarily want to say that one's more important than the other. They kind of are though. Like, that's the number one thing that we're talking about. The number one thing that we're talking about is what that is from a standpoint. No, hold on. I got to be clear. When it comes to like culture or values, like coaching development on those things, like, you got to take it within context. When we're talking about like operational stuff within the business, that's the number one number.
Yeah.
There's many other things that are important, and like you can be focused on that number and your culture can be a mess. And I don't think that number will then be sustainable or your client relationship. So like understand that part. When you're looking at it from the operational lens, the financial lens, when you're getting down to the nuts and bolts of the math, like, for us, that's the number one thing that we're looking at.
Makes sense. Definitely.
Now on the reoccurrings, what do you think on that? Like, do you have a percentage that you think a business, I don't, like, look, someone's doing all direct hires, they're doing all direct hires. But let's say let me ask two different questions. If you're doing both, what do you think the healthy split is? Reoccurrings to non-reoccurrings out of your gross profit?
I don't know the answer to the question of what is a healthy split. I think you might be better. I would like to ask you that question because you're probably in a better position to answer it. As far as would you want to start there? What do you think is a healthy split?
I can tell you the number that we're really trying to benchmark to. It's 80% reoccurrings and 20%, like, essentially most of the non-reoccurrings would be deemed direct hires. There's some other stuff, but that's the bulk of it. Yeah. So I'll tell you, we're not there right now. I'm happy to share it. We're at 58%, but that's actually a pretty healthy number for us at 58%. Yeah. And we know we're driving out of business development to keep pushing that forward. And at the same time, if we're breaking direct hire records in the process of that, I can live with that as long as our reoccurrings are growing. Yeah. And I'm sure you saw this with clients, but that number is actually improving for us right now. I think in 22, we were in like the 40s. And again, that wasn't all bad because our gross profit was growing. It was just like, we just saw our direct hire business just catch complete fire, and it's grown again in 23 and 24.
Fantastic.
But our overall growths, like reoccurrings, have outpaced that. And we don't have, to your point earlier, we do not have it all figured out. Like, this is something we've been focused on trying to get that number. Like, we want it. Hey, what do you want? Would my CRO would say, I want it both. I want both. I want the direct hires to grow, Yeah, I want to get our reoccurrings in line, and ultimately I want those at 80%, but I want the direct hires to be higher than they've ever been.
Yeah.
He's like, well, that's going to be a tough hill to climb. I know. Like, let's go do it together. So,
great.
We're in the process of that, but okay. Well,
yeah. I mean, I think for people listening who maybe think, oh, this doesn't apply to me because I run a search business, really challenge that thinking. It's not just like people, when they think of reoccurring, they think maybe temps, or maybe they think consultants. You guys call them consultants, we call them contractors, same thing. Like maybe IT consulting, or in financial services or accounting, you have like high value temps, basically consultants. But there's other types. There's interims, right? There's fractional executives that you could place, because what we're trying to do, if you have an executive search practice, is you're not necessarily bolting on a completely different business where you're talking to a whole different, type of candidate. What we're trying to see is working with the same customers, the same clients, and the same level of candidate. What other service lines could we add that would then generate the recurring revenue, right? And so if you run an exec search practice, why not offer a fractional or interim division might be one way. The other way, maybe you're not an executive recruiter, but you place mid-level professional or technical staff, right? And so one way of creating the reoccurring there is with a mini RPO model where, let's say the client is going to hire 6 or 10 or 15 of whatever job title over the course of the next 12 months. Well, instead of just doing it the way you've always done in the past, where you just make each placement and then invoice them when you make those placements, why not say, look, give us all those searches and we'll charge you a monthly fee. And if we exceed the target number of, if you end up hiring more people, then we'll invoice you, for those additional placements. But that at a minimum, you're going to hire 10 people. So based on that, this would be the amount of the invoice. We'll just divide that by 12. And we can work much more closely with your business. We can act as an extension of your firm. We'll be your brand ambassadors in the talent marketplace. We'll give you a dedicated, project, coordinator within our firm. We're going to spend time with you on site. So we're going to offer you a much higher service level than you would if you just work with contingent or even retained firms on a one-off or, onesie-twosie basis. And at the same time, you can capture greater value because we can give you a reduction. You may not want to offer that, but you can say, look, if you're going to spend, $300,000 in recruiting fees this year, why don't you pay us $250,000? We'll take care of it all for you. We'll make the process more efficient, more effective, improve your time to fill, improve the retention and success of the people that you do hire. And it's going to save you a ton of time, so that then creates the reoccurring revenue, even in a permanent placement situation.
So I love that. And you said that so well that I'm kind of second guessing myself because I haven't talked. You guys sent me an email and asked like, hey, give us a baseline of what you think you want to talk about. And I'm still working on that, praying on it, and I plan on sending it over the weekend. So this is on my list, and I didn't plan on this at all.
Cool. Yeah, it's a good topic. I'd love to hear your take on it.
I want to do a couple things. I'm thinking like 3 different like kind of topics, but the one that I want to talk about is getting resourceful with reoccurring. So I was thinking about titling it.
Yeah.
But you said it so well. I'm like, man, well, maybe they don't need that because he just laid out. I mean, I can add to that, but
I'm sure
that was really good. Like that's exactly right on, we call them like block RPOs.
RPO. Okay.
But that's exactly right. You have these other ways to do it, where you can create some predictability and some reoccurrence, that could be really good for the client. It all starts with You're not going to get that though if you don't do a good job fulfilling for them. So,
yeah,
but
for sure.
Man, okay, well,
Yeah,
cool.
Look, there's tons we can learn from you, Aaron. So whatever topic we land on, I'm sure it's going to be brilliant. And so yeah, this is, out of everything we teach, we've got the 6 pillars, and then within each pillar there's a roadmap, and then within the roadmap there's playbooks and there's strategies. So this topic is like a tiny piece of what we teach, and we could definitely expand on that for sure.
Okay. Well, I'm excited. I will shoot you guys that email over the weekend, but that will be one of the bullets. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to it. So we'll see. I'll see you in about a month.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably a good place to finish up today. I would ask that if you listened, I know you got value out of this. There's a ton of stuff that Mark shared that, he said it well, like golden nuggets. They were all over this. So I think it's one to save and go back and listen to again. But if you have the chance, specifically, October is a great time of year to go to Florida. But if you're in the recruiting space, we're going to put it in our show notes. And Mark had mentioned it earlier, but I highly recommend joining us at the event. I'm looking forward to it, but just don't come because Mark's a great guy, or you think I'm a good guy, or someone else. That's another benefit to it, I think. But you're going to be able to learn some great stuff here, and Mark's covered a lot of it here today. But you're going to get 2 full days with him and a crew that has done some good things in the industry. So thank you, Mark. We ask that you please share this with one other person if you found it valuable. And if you could, leave us a rating and a review. We'd really appreciate that. Anything else you want to leave us with, Mark?
Aaron, I can't wait to meet you in person, and thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thanks for coming on. Have a great day, all, and we'll see you soon.